right, good afternoon, everyone. So today we're going to talk about Synergy, so HPE-based Synergy. We've also got a Docker demo as well that we'll run on Synergy, and using Chef Automate and also InSpec as well. So we didn't actually have InSpec within the title, but we're going to use InSpec. We'll demo it today as well. We'll take you through that, show you how to make the code work. Should be fun. So up here presenting with me is Nigel Wright from Dimension Data.
Hello.
You want to introduce yourself, Nigel?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm the Principal Cloud Consultant at Dimension Data New Zealand. So worked with Anthony quite a lot in our earlier incarnation at HPE. So pretty happy to be here. Thanks for attending, even though there's a lot of exciting other sessions on at the same time.
Yeah, I think
we're up against Habitat. So
I know, we're up against Habitat and Splunk, I think, as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably got done by that one. So I'm Anthony Rees. I'm a solutions architect, and I'm based out of Melbourne, Australia, and I work for Chef. Okay. So we've got two main areas that we're going to cover off today. So first of all, we'll take you through OneView, and we'll take you through automating it with Chef, and we're also going to use InSpec as well. So we've got the ability now to be able to check that infrastructure using InSpec. So we've written some code on that. We'll demo that and get it up and running. Just out of interest, out of curiosity, how many of you are familiar with OneView or have used it in the past? Yeah, so not too many. That's what I thought. Okay. That's good because we'll show you the interface, we'll show you how it works, we'll give you a bit of description of how that works and tie it back to maybe something that you're more familiar with, like public cloud, and reference it back to that. And then once we've gone through, we'll show you how the code works for Chef, how you can repeatably create physical infrastructure, and then we'll take you in and show you a Docker-based demo on Synergy. Using Habitat.
Using Habitat. We have to chuck Habitat in, otherwise I think we get fined or something. So
I think so. I think you get thrown out of ChefConf if you don't use Habitat in the demo.
That's right. That's right. Cool.
All right. So without further ado, OneView.
Let's have a look at OneView because it's kind of easier for you to see what's going on rather than us talk about random concepts. So OneView is the server management platform essentially for physical hardware, right? So we use that to set up the storage, we set up the networking, set up all the interconnects and all the upstream networking, all those bits and pieces that make physical servers run, right? All the stuff that's kind of hard to do. So what we can see here is we get a view of exactly what's going on in our chassis, in our enclosures, and in our physical servers. So we can have a look in the data center. We get a view of our data center, which is not that exciting. We've just got one data center running at the moment.
Yeah, and it also shows the temperature as well. So you might not be able to see it, but it changes color depending on the temperature of the server, so you can actually tell, whether your data centers run hot or cold and things like that.
It's a pretty useful feature. And so we can even go down to the rack, so we can see all the different components, the physical components that are running in those enclosures and in those frames. And we can go down to, even down to the power delivery devices. If you really want to see the power delivery devices in a GUI, we can do that. There's nothing there at the moment, so we don't have to worry about that. So that's the kind of stuff to get a view of what's happening in the kind of macro level, of your enclosure, of your frame. But we can also drill down into what we have server profiles. And server profiles are basically the way that a server is configured. So it maps all the networking, all the storage. We have absolutely nothing there at the moment, which is good. It's a fresh Synergy installation. Yeah, that's right. Fresh Synergy installation, so we'll go through some configuration of that. So we can go through, we can actually add operating system deployment, we can set up firmware, do all the network connections, all the local storage mapping, firmware, boot settings, BIOS, all that kind of stuff that you need to do with a server. We can do that with the server profile. And the idea is that we have different profiles for different functions, different roles. So we can kind of make sure that we have the right kind of connections and the right kind of storage for the right kind of server role. And the other kind of interesting things we've got here is we've got a list of all the server hardware, so we should have a whole bunch of servers running here. This gives us all the information about the physical hardware, all the ILO connectivity information, so we can go in and have a look at what's going on, on the actual box, which is pretty useful.
Yeah, all the firmware versions.
Correct.
You can use this to be able to manage it and understand when you need to go and upgrade it and whether it's been upgraded, and pulls all that information through for you.
Yep, and we have network information as well, so we can start creating our fiber channel networks, our Ethernet networks, etc. And there's
tie
nothing here at the moment.
To it.
What's that, sorry?
Tie your VLANs to it.
Tie your VLANs to it, yep, which is pretty good. And we can start grouping together networks as well into network sets. So that's the kind of overview of OneView. It's used to manage your physical infrastructure. I think it's probably better we jump back into this. Where are we here? Play from current slide. Yeah. And we can show you some of the code to actually configure the physical infrastructure. So what we've got at the moment, we've got a Synergy frame that's been racked and stacked, it's been connected into data center, and it's ready to go, right? And usually the next thing you do would be try and find someone who knows how to run OneView and configure that server and try and configure it again and try and configure it again and try and configure it again until it's up and running, right? That's obviously not an optimal way of managing this infrastructure. So we have Box Hugger.
We do have Box Hugger, adequately named for those that love hugging tin, right? I just did that so that we could upset some of the HPE people that we used to work with. But no, they love the name anyway. And so basically what we're going to do now is we're going to have the ability to be able to orchestrate using Chef and to be able to create that environment and to be able to define, you'll be able to define the network, and then from the network we can define the VLANs, the fiber channels that are going to be connected, what's connected to which. Then we'll be able to do the interconnects, add scope to it as well, and then add server profiles to that too. All of the code that we've got is all shared on GitHub, so it's all publicly available for you to be able to use and fork and contribute to if you want to. And essentially, in terms of relationships, so to give you an idea of how all of this ties together, I think the relationship diagram probably does the best job here of describing it. It's a little bit, how can I say? It's a little bit, it's a bit of a hit and miss learning game, I guess you'd probably call it, Nigel. Yeah. And what I mean by that is there's a set of precedents that you need to have with dependencies, and if you try and stand up, for example, if you try and go and stand up your worker profile or add your scope to something before you've actually gone and defined everything within the network, you're going to get a failure, right? Because there's dependencies on it, and it's probably not that easy to go through and to be able to understand that, and that's why we've sort of put this information together, and we've also put that up on GitHub as well, because it's a really good starter pack for you to actually be able to go and stand up something that's working right through to including the server profile, because it's quite difficult to get started. The document that goes through and describes all of this in terms of the HPE document is about 250 pages to be able to get this information out and to be able to find the dependencies and make it work.
I like one image rather than 300 and 250 pages. You know, it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit easier to read, right? And so what we're going to do, so we'll demo this in a second, and essentially what we're going to do is we're going to go and create that Ethernet first, and we'll add the VLAN to it, attach a fiber channel off to that. Which will basically give you a network set. And you'll be able to see all of this start creating immediately. And then what we'll do is we'll then attach it to the particular Synergy machine, so to the physical hardware that it's going to be running on. And then we will attach that to a server profile. So the first server profile we're attaching to is the Docker.
Yeah, so we've got a server profile set up for Docker.
Server profile.
We're going to have a Docker Enterprise Edition running on top of our Synergy installation. It's the whole point of this one.
Yep, and we'll need that for later. So all of this sets ourselves up for the Habitat Docker demo on Synergy afterwards. So we'll go and create everything that we need, and then we'll go and utilize that afterwards. And one other thing that we need to realize as well, and you'll see this when you go and have a look at the default profile, that's contained within the cookbook, is that on the left-hand side are the steps that you go through to go and create. Because as I said before, there's a set of dependencies. You've got to follow that dependency tree before you can actually go and create. But to successfully delete, you can't follow the same set of dependencies, and it's not even reversed. It's actually a completely different order. And if you try and do it in any other order, as Nigel and I found out,
things catch on fire.
Yeah, it catches on fire. It doesn't work, right? So also within the notes, and we've set this up so there's basically a case statement and an if statement that goes in there, and it'll work out whether you're deleting or whether you're creating, and that's probably the easiest way to describe it. So let's jump across and have a look at the code.
So this is really important because what we've seen in the past is people, when they start to manage these physical infrastructure pieces, people have their own way of doing things, their own way of naming things, their own way of connecting the networks. And between one sysadmin and another sysadmin, it could be completely different. And then when you have tens, hundreds, thousands of servers, it's a nightmare to actually see who's done what and is there any standard here, right? And we're all about standardization. So it's kind of critical that we have something like this.
Yeah, 100%. And so as you can see, as soon as we take a look at all the attributes that we can pass in, so of course this allows your administrators of the platform to be able to define what's the Ethernet that they require, the fiber channels that they're going to go and connect to it, the VLAN IDs and things like that, and all the way down to the enclosure group that you want it to go and use, what's the server profile that you want to go and attach to it. You can attach multiple server profiles so if you've got a multi-tiered application, for example, you can go and attach server profiles for your database, server profiles for the web servers that are going to sit in front of it, the load balancers, and et cetera, et cetera. And really, it's just a loop that you're going to pass through it and be able to leverage that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the interesting thing is here, and I think from our experience when we were at HPE, is that if you don't use a repeatable pattern like this, you get into a situation where we've seen customers that have had environments that are just not even similar to each other.
No,
right? So dev does not reflect the next environment, which might be system test, all the way through up into production. And we've even seen environments where you've got Data Center 1 and Data Center 2, which are their production environments, and they've got completely different naming standards.
Different VLANs in the network.
Different VLANs and
it's madness.
Yeah. And with this, it's so easy for you to be able to create it for your dev environment, test it, and then rinse and repeat essentially. Mm-hmm. So you want to talk about that other customer that had the issue with multiple environments not matching each other and not even looking the same while I run this code?
Yeah. So generally, what we saw was it comes back to that missing VLAN, right? So we had an issue with a particular customer who. One day, their workload stopped working, right? Their servers were unresponsive. They weren't able to do anything. And they went through that kind of day-long, 2-day-long, what's happened, what's changed, I don't know. And no one really thought to go and have a look at maybe see what OneView's doing, see if anything's been removed. There was just no way of tracking that. And generally with things like OneView and things like ILO, there's one username and password. There's admin and whatever the password is, which is usually something stupid, right? And there's no way of tracking who's done what. It's just admin's logged in and admin's changed something. So that's why we need something like this, so we can make sure if something's changed, and Anthony will show the demo in a second around InSpec, we can see what's changed, and we can make sure we've got a baseline profile.
So that's going off and creating now, and while it's running the cookbook, we can actually see it. We should see it start. Here we go. So you can see we've already got the Ethernet and the fiber channel that's started to create there. You'll see it as it's coming up. And we'll also see that the server profile will start to appear in a moment if it hasn't already been created. Right, so it's still creating the server profile. There you go. It's allocating it to the enclosure group now, and it's working on creating that Docker server profile. And there you go.
Nice.
Just appeared. So there we go. So now we can essentially see if we go back to the network. And we click on this little thing here, bang, there you go. And everything, you can see, everything has been attached to itself. So we can see how the relationships within this particular Ethernet and what it's attached to, what does it attach itself to in terms of the server, the Synergy server that it's using, what's the profile that it's using, and what's the enclosure group that you've bound it to, and all the way through to the scope that it's referencing. So it's a really repeatable way to be able to do that.
And it's fast, right? That was
it's pretty quick, wasn't it?
Under 5 minutes, when normally that would be kind of a few hours of trial and error. And trial and error is never fun when you've got pressure to actually get something into production.
Yeah, and the other thing is too, like you doing it through the GUI takes time, and the chances of you making a mistake with the amount of configuration that has to be done, that would probably be 15-20 minutes, I guess, with working through the graphical user interface.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you have to roll that out into every single environment, you just multiply it out, right? And now it's all done automatically. But the interesting thing from here is, of course, you can use Chef to do this, and there's also other ways to be able to do it as well, because it's an open API that's given to you. But the big difference with going with Chef, of course, is that you can use InSpec to be able to test it. And my good friend Russell Seymour, so he's been working on the InSpec piece for OneView. and it's in a beta at the moment. He's been kind enough to be able to share it with me, and I can show it to you working today. And basically, what we're going to do is everything that we've just gone and created now, we're going to go and test it. So you can have these tests running continuously, have it running in A2, right? Bringing all of that information through into reporting, run it daily, run it hourly, run it every 10 minutes if you want, and make sure that the configuration for each one of your environments is identical. You can even use it, for example, to be able to make sure that production environments match each other as well.
And that gets rid of that issue that I just talked about before. You know, if that had happened, someone had removed a VLAN, you'd probably get an alert before anything bad happened, right? So that's kind of critical. We need to make sure that it's exactly what it should be at all times. 20 minutes is it's quite a short amount of time to go through an entire physical provisioning exercise, but
that's okay. That's okay. So let's test it and see if it see how it actually runs. Right. So that InSpec check is run, and let me make it a little bit bigger so you can read it. There we go. Right. So we've gone through and we've checked to make sure that the Ethernet's correct. That we're using and we've tagged the correct VLANs as well. You can see there that we've got an error on the enclosure group. So it's probably picked a different enclosure group for this particular one and failed my test because I wasn't dynamically passing in the variable, which you can do actually. And then I've had it to fail some logical interconnect informations here to show you what it looks like when we do get a fail on the matcher. And then finally gone through and checked to make sure that we've got affinity with the bays and also to make sure that we've got the correct worker profile assigned to it within the server grouping as well. So InSpec works really well against OneView. It's very cool. It's quite cool.
And that's just gonna be so much easier for your entire fleet, right? If you scale that out to all your physical infrastructure and get a view of what's happening across your entire fleet, that's fantastic. And it also doesn't have to be just the newest, latest and greatest Synergy, right? Because there's a ton of HPE hardware out there that runs OneView, and we can still use this to actually start getting a view of what's happening in those environments. You won't get as much information, but we can still see, right? So that means you're getting a bit more value out of that old tin that's lying around.
Should we quickly jump in and do the habitat?
We can try. We can try.
See if we make it before we get thrown off stage.
We can certainly try. So the key thing about this is that there's a component called the image streamer, which basically streams operating system images across into the server hardware. So that means that you can have your gold images, your application configuration stored on this module, and it will create a nice SCSI connection and spin up your virtual machines, your physical infrastructure rather, based on an OS. So that's kind of the key behind this. I'm going to skip through these so we can actually get to the good bits. But we're deploying Docker Enterprise Edition on top of Synergy, right? So we've got BoxHugger preparing the physical infrastructure, getting that all up and running. And then we've got a hodgepodge of scripts and chef cookbooks to kind of stand up Docker Enterprise Edition, which isn't ideal, right? So that's what we're doing at the moment. And the idea is that the next iteration of this is going to be moving a lot more of those kind of gold image deployments into the BoxHugger kind of cookbook, so we can start doing all that from one and getting that streamlined, right? And we mentioned Habitat because we have to mention Habitat. So Habitat's really good for this because we can actually we can export it as a tarball and run it on bare metal. We can export it as a Docker image. We can export it as whatever we like and run it wherever we like, right? Which is key for Synergy because Synergy is all about composable infrastructure. One day it might be a Docker Enterprise Edition cluster. The next day it might be Kubernetes. The next day it might be Hadoop, right? I doubt that will happen in actual production, but it's possible. And because we've only got about 30 seconds left, here's one we prepared earlier. So Docker Enterprise Edition is stood up on our Synergy environment, which is all good. It's there, it's happy, that's not it, that's it. So it's running happily along on our Synergy. And so what I can do now is I've actually got a really critical, business critical application that I'm going to deploy onto my Docker Enterprise Edition on top of Synergy using Habitat. So, thank you. I'm just going to make a really quick change here because I'm a really good developer. I'm just going to bump the version up, and that's going to be the end of my deployment. The only feature I'm adding is an additional number to the version. Really good developer. Did I mention that?
It's a good feature, that one.
So I'm just going to add that. I'm going to commit it with a really useful message. Version number.
Version number change. Beautiful.
Yeah, cool. And then I'm just going to push that. If I can spell, which I can. Hooray. Then all going to plan, yay, it's pushed, fantastic. So it's pushed to my GitLab environment. And what's going to happen now really quickly is Jenkins is going to pick that up. Don't worry, there's only about 30 seconds left, so we can have a look here at what's going on in my build. I've got a build that's just kicked off now. So Jenkins is running my build, and it's going to do a few things. It's going to clone the repo. It's going to build the Habitat package for me. It's going to export that Habitat package as a Docker image. It's going to push it up to my Docker registry, and it's going to deploy it to Docker Enterprise Edition running on Synergy. This should only take about 30 seconds or so. It's going to happily build that package, so we can just quickly drill into this, and we'll see what's going on. We should see a whole bunch of Habitat goodness. Yes, you're probably really familiar with this now. A lot of checkboxes, a lot of verifying and installation of packages. So that's pretty much done. Yeah, it's done the build. It's exporting to Docker now. This is really cool because you don't have to mess around with anything. It's just doing everything for me. I don't have to bother with a Docker file. It's going to create that image for me and upload it, which should happen any second now.
And the great part is you can automate this all the way from automating the provisioning of your tin, your VLANs, the profiles that are required for Docker Enterprise Edition to be able to stand all of this up. And then, of course, with Hab, you can push it onto any platform that you need.
Absolutely.
And most of these customers that we know that are using Synergy are using hybrid-based environments, right? So they've got a data center and they've also got public cloud. And that's where this really, I think, fits in quite neatly.
Yeah, and there we go. It's pushed it up to the registry. It's going to deploy it. It's deployed to Docker. We've got a happy little success there. So in theory, we should have something working any second now. Should be a stack here called Habman. Let's get some refresh happening. Cool, and there is. And if we just quickly check this, we should have my really critical application. There we go. Hopefully this will work. Hey, and it did. So I've got Habicatman running, and now I'm just going to spend...
Ooh, with sound as well.
There is, and I've got my little Habitat Pac-Man running. Really business critical application. And that's all done on Habitat, Docker, Synergy, bare metal provisioning, right? So...
Complete with sound. And there you go, 3 live demos, all worked.
Yeah, only a little bit over time.
Yep.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.